King. 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 King.
Great Friday and welcome to the King Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm really happy today because I have someone who I've only known for less than 6 months, but has already had a huge impact in my life and my influence and my growth as a spiritual being and just my overall journey toward being fully human. She has been profound in that. And I want to welcome to the King Connections podcast today, Jess Engel. How are you doing today, Jess?
Doing great. Thank you, King. And thanks for that intro. It has been a really great first 6 months getting to know you and stepping into being fully human, not even more fully human, being fully human.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we like to get our show started, just kind of set the context and the energy level. And I know you're familiar with setting space. That's one of your expertise. I want to ask you, what is your spiritual energy number from being zero life sucks to right now being life is awesome, being a 10? Where would you say right now you fall within those numbers?
I'm vibrating at a 10.
Excellent. I join you at a 10, so that lets we're going to have a great show. We both vibrating in a high level of energy, and so we're going to bring a lot of love and rhythm, wild rhythm, to the show. And so, one more thing before we begin our show, I want to ask you this: tell me something good.
Hmm. Something good is that today is Friday the 13th.
Mm, it is.
It's
It is.
historically been a day that people fear or, it's a little superstitious. But in my realm and in my space today and in the frequency I'm holding, Friday the 13th is a day of divinity.
Mm,
And
I
that is
love that.
good. That is good.
That is great. That's great, actually. I didn't even realize, in the way I'm just flowing and working it today is Friday 13th in the context of the historical um, evil that's associated with Friday the 13th, the movies and 13th floor and buildings and those kind of superstitions. But I love how you brought that back to love, energy, divinity. So gratitude for that. Well, let me get started. I'm going to read your bio, a brief bio, so that folks understand who they're listening to and why you're important and why this interview should matter for those who resonate with it. So, Jess Engel is a nervous system guide and end of life companion leading a wild rhythm movement, a growing community devoted to emotional regulation, frequency alignment, and belonging. After navigating profound grief and a bipolar 1 diagnosis, she began creating sustainable rhythms to support mental stability and inner coherence. On Path to Forgiveness, Jess shares her live mental health journey and her work as a death doula, exploring how forgiveness, nervous system regulation, and dignity shape the way we live and the way we die. So, welcome to the King Connections podcast again, Jess Engel.
Thank you so much.
So, a lot to unpack there, definitely. It's a short bio, but there's a lot in that short bio. And the first thing I want to just really that jumps out at me is the term death doula. Can you kind of explain what a death doula is?
Yes, it is a peer partner during the end of life transition.
Hmm. And how did you come on? How did you come about being a deaf doula or being exposed to it as well?
I'm so glad you're asking that. The reason I wore this red dress today is in response to that. I was brought into this beautiful path, which I call the red thread path. It's one that you come into through a lineage of sisterhood. And it was my dear friend Nanette who called me one day and asked me if I would be her death doula. And in that moment, I didn't know what it was. But I knew because we had already been birth doulas for each other I knew innately what she was asking me to do,
Hmm.
to come in and be her friend and her sister. And in that journey, she taught me. It was about a 5-month journey. And she allowed me to be a student while I listened to what it takes to really be a companion and advocate and provide dignity to someone who is going through that process.
And what would you say it feels like being a deaf doula? How does it feel?
Hmm. It feels like an honor.
Hmm.
It's a very mystical place to be in the world when you're being pulled away from your body, your loved ones, your home. And so it's one of the most beautiful places that I find to hang out. It's very deep and intimate and humbling and boring. It's all of those things that just kind of brings real life into focus. Yeah, death teaches me more about life.
Wow. Interesting.
Mm.
Now, one other thing that jumped out to me, and I really want to unpack your bio several levels, but another thing that really just jumped out to me was I've heard the term bipolar, and I have
Mhm.
a superficial understanding of what it means. I have an aunt that has bipolar, but I've never heard the term bipolar one diagnosis. As far
Mm.
as I didn't realize there's different levels to being bipolar. So can
Mm.
you kind of explain that and what that means?
Yeah, the type 1 is to indicate that um, I don't have the depressive side of bipolar.
Hmm.
Bipolar type 2 is when you alternate between deep depression and then high states of euphoria. So I tend to stand just on the euphoria side in the type 1. I do have like deep moments of like, I just feel like I got wiped out. Like there's no ground underneath me. I don't know how to move forward. It's kind of like a deflated state when I lose my euphoria.
Hmm.
So in that, I have definite swings, mood swings of up and down, or I've got this and now I don't got it.
Do you feel that happening when it's happening? Can you kind of catch yourself when you say, "Well, I'm now losing my euphoria"? Do you find yourself saying that to yourself?
Yeah, well, I just turned 50, so I've been around the planet 50, or I've been around the sun 50 times now, experiencing this way of thinking and being. And I've really got a firm awareness now. And I've chosen to go an unmedicated route for a long time. I have opted in now to the pharmaceuticals, but being unmedicated allowed me to um, really feel what was going on in my body in a deep felt experiential way, and I tracked a lot of data on my own psychology and behavior, just because I've been in that field of autism and really owning my neurodivergent gifts before labeling myself with bipolar disorder type 1. So it's a new diagnosis, but it's a very old, familiar mental field that I am very aware of, and I'm very aware of where I am now in the cycle. Um, and I can prevent the cycle from happening. I can stay out of euphoric states. I can stay grounded and present. As
Now,
long as, there's not like a big shock wave, which will, that happens as a human, life happens, and I find my way back to center fairly quickly, which is what's allowing me to be online with being fully human now.
one of the things that also stands out is that you use the term profound grief. Are you open to discussing some of what that profound grief was and sharing with our listening audience today?
Whew. Yeah, bring it up and out. Yeah, just recently I went through a profound grief and shock of losing my father to bipolar disorder.
Mm.
And that came about Christmas Eve 2025. So I'm just, a little over a month past that experience. And the grief of losing my father, on top of the grief of the stigma of the disability, on top of it being a suicide, and not only that, a gun suicide. It's very complex with what's going on in the world. And so I feel it as a collective that we don't have a grip on our gun violence or our mental health, and that this was preventable. And that it's time to speak up and do something about it.
Mm.
So the grief is taking me into this place of deep understanding where we are as humans, and stepping into my voice so that I can honor where we're at and I can reflect from this place. And, as we become cooperative as a human collective, we can come up with new strategies and see new possibilities of how we can move forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing some of that. You know, one of the things that I've learned personally as it relates to dealing with grief is that I'm a very personal, private person, and sharing things that's personal to me in a public setting, I wouldn't say it's difficult. It's just that I haven't felt that it brings any fulfillment to me. And that's where I have you in my life now to help me navigate that and view that maybe from a different perspective as I get older and as I get wiser. And one of the things that really I would say that I've learned in my short term of dealing with you is how you're able to take on a lot of people's energy drainage when people are dealing with their dramas, their issues, and they share that with you, and you take that on. And you've used to taking that, you're trained in that place. I just want to have you speak to how do you keep that from being absorbed into yourself and now carrying the weight and burdens of their energy drains and their traumas into your life.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. um, First of all, as a Reiki guide, I have come into the experience of energy and how energy flows in this world, um, as an electromagnetic field. And as we bring our electromagnetic fields into space together, I have an opportunity to channel where that current goes. And so I've been practicing this over the last 10 years, I would say. I've had a real deep focus on energy management, my own energy management 101. And then when I come into the field of other energy and being able to discern between my energy field and the energy field of other. And it's a constant inquiry of asking my energy field, whose is that? And asking questions of like, why is that attaching, or why is that affecting me? Why is that triggering me? And what is it that I need to do to allow that to release,
Mm.
to allow that to dissolve or transmute or transform? And so I have a myriad of tools of how I do that, but I typically use Mother Earth and the seat beneath me, and just allow myself to feel grounded and supported and stable. And as soon as I feel that hookup with my own creator, Earth, that created my body, I'm able to just be that channel and release. And she's such a beautiful mother who's willing. She's kind of like the giving tree. that story of that Shel Silverstein wrote about how the tree just gives and gives and gives and gives, and like that's who she is. Like the tree just will give until it's down to a very last stump, and she's like, I have nothing else to give, but come sit and we'll be together, you know? And that's kind of the life cycle that we go through as we have a body and we release from our body, and it all goes back to her. She's supporting us in that process. And so the more I trust that and I lean into that, and my faith is bound in that connection, then I don't have any fear. And I can certainly ask anywhere in my energetic field, is there anything I need to handle or maintain? And specifically in the energy field of my body, when it comes to my organs and all of my cells, that's where I really want to ask. Within my DNA, where are there distortions in the field that I can release and shift back into alignment?
You know, you didn't mention it in your bio, but I know this from my own personal conversations. And you mentioned it briefly in one of your explanations, your answers, your experience working with autistic children. Can you talk a little bit about what puts you in that work and what you've done with that work, years experience, and then what kind of fulfillment do you get from doing that work as well?
Yeah, well, I got into that work as a young parent, just based on the dysregulation cycles of my born family. I became a mother very early, very young mother. And in my search, because I was motherless child, in my search to be a good mother, I found myself learning how to be an early childhood educator. And I did that through my teacher, Maria Montessori. And she was a doctor of early childhood education and family medicine. And she taught me how to integrate family life with the life skills that we need to function in the world. And so Montessori classrooms are where I developed my skills, not only to learn how children grow and develop, but to learn what I missed out on as I grew and developed. So it was kind of like this parallel opportunity to not only serve my children as a supportive mother, but to then reparent myself in what I hadn't received as a child. And what I found in that process, because I taught for 15 years or so and developed classrooms and schools, was that I kept gravitating toward the children who had emotional dysregulation. I kept gravitating toward the classrooms that had behavior problems. And then I needed to go in and support by observing and offering behavior solutions. And, you know, at that point I was named or identified as a child whisperer. Because I knew that if I went into the space that was dysregulated, that had energy distortions in the field, I could just put my body next to theirs. I could sit on earth. I could feel grounded. I could move into my breath. I learned to do all of these things just as a teacher. And then that would calm the child. And then there's this coherent field where we're co-regulating. And I did that unconsciously. Like I was called into classrooms because it worked, but none of us knew why it was working or how it worked. But ultimately, I took bigger cases. I took more challenging cases of children who needed to run out of a classroom, which we call behaviorally elopement, which is a huge safety concern for schools. And these children would typically need to get outside. And one of the things that I observed with one of my first favorite students was that she would go and put her hands in the in the dirt, in the mud, and like the muddier, the better. And then I would just watch her transform from like a wildebeest to a beautiful, happy child of wonder, where she's like, have you ever noticed that the trees, and then, just like she would come alive. So
Mm.
it was in that field of observation where I found my own personal reflection of like, oh, this child isn't naughty and they're not trying to misbehave. They have a physical and energetic need that's not being met. And typically it comes out emotionally and behaviorally. And the amount of love and compassion that I developed for those children and those families moved my life forward. I ended up developing an organization to bring education and behavioral health care together and start collaborating about ways that we can include children in our classrooms rather than continue to exile them into homes where they can be treated.
Mm. Now
So, been on the path of inclusivity, and that definitely includes myself at the center.
absolutely, absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about the wild rhythm movement, what that is, and kind of what is the goal. And
Yeah. Well, I started my own wild rhythm about, it was about July last year, 2025. And I had taken a trip to Colombia and I had a huge opportunity to go work at Mountains of Hope and be a guide for the patients there. And as I looked at that opportunity, I knew for myself, if I were to tap into being a client there or a patient there, that I could also receive the same way that I did as a Montessori teacher. I could receive the detox, the medicine, the nutrition, the food, and the pace of being in a wellness center. And so I created my first rendition of the Wild Rhythm, which was putting together a daily practice pretty much on my calendar that would allow me to get enough emotional regulation breaks so that even if I come into a field of a lot of distortion and upset and shock, that I can quickly go back in, or I can quickly go to the next step of my rhythm and release all of that energy, come back into center, be full again, and ready to serve again. And so I saw like, oh, I don't need to have a whole day take me out because I went too far in one direction energetically. I can actually regulate my energy and find a pace that keeps me at top performance so I can be fully human all the time and like not keep hitting a wall and falling back.
you mentioned Mountains of Hope, and that's where you and I met.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely want to talk about that. I want to explore a little bit of Mountains of Hope and just our journey there, and which led us to be where we are right now, and what we're going to be working together, co-creating together on. So, give me your definition of Mountains of Hope.
Mm.
How do you see it? How would you describe it to someone who's never been there before?
Yeah, Mountains of Hope is love. It's tender loving care. It's a handful of warm embrace, and at the center is cacao. It's like this Colombian bean of the heart that just wants to emanate and tell you, I love you, I love you, I love you. You are well. You are everything that your potential aspires to be.
Hmm. And what brought you to Columbia, Mountains of Hope?
Mm. I've got some sweet friends who have been journeying around finding beautiful places in the world for their own wellness and sharing that with our community. And so I followed them. I rode their coattails into Medellin and learned all about the culture and the history of Colombia. And really, truly, it inspired me to hold on tighter to evolution and transformation and being a spokesperson for opening up to changing this world.
Absolutely. You know, had you had anything or heard about Mike Murphy at all prior to going to Mountains of Hope?
The first time I heard about him was through a dear friend of mine who is in the end of her life transition now. And she was the one who was looking for that love, looking for that place that just felt right. And when she found it, she informed me that this was the place. This was the place she was going. And so then I was able to not only come into Colombia and learn about Colombia, but also find this. At the time, it felt like I was hearing it in stereo because I had this dear friend who wanted to go to Mountains of Hope and find this place of love and be held. And then I had my dear friends who were going to Medellin and just showing me the depth of Colombia and inviting me there. So these two invitations did speak to me through spirit loud and clear that was my path to go. And looking at it for myself, I wanted to create the most harmonious place that I could for myself to be able to serve there.
I came across Mountains of Hope through my reading of Mike Murphy, who's the founder and creator of Mountains of Hope, his book, The Creation Frequency. And he talked about, and that really got me through a dark time of my life, transition moment in my life. And I don't want to say a dark time, actually, now that I look back at it. I look at it as that was a lesson. I was in school. And I look at it a dark time because when I was vibrating a lower frequency, you look at yourself as a victim, and then you say dark time. But see, I no longer see myself as a victim from that. I look at that as more of a necessary test that I had to go through. I came across a Napoleon Hill video, which is very interesting because I know I've done a lot of reading of Napoleon Hill's works. I've never heard him mention this in his work at all. It shows you how the universe works sometimes. I know there's people out there putting out these AI videos that are using historical figures like Napoleon Hill and Alan Watts. They're using their voice, their likeness, but it's not their words. But it's words they probably would say. But if you're familiar with their work, you know that's not the words they actually use. But in saying that, Napoleon Hill, this video I came across, talked about how powerful blessings only come to those who've been tested and broken. And that because he says that if you're untested and unbroken, you could not handle the powerful blessings because you would think it would be about ego, that it's about you and you created this, and you wouldn't be able to empathize and have the emotional intelligence to work with people who are going to need lifting up because you haven't experienced what they're going to be experiencing at that level. And you talk about a profound grief that you had to navigate your way through. And I think about how when I went to Mountains of Hope, I was coming through being broken and being tested. And as you said, my definition of Mountains of Hope in that respect would be healing. And it heals you mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. But I put the caveat there, if you allow it. Right. And I went there to experience Mountains of Hope and to be open and not go there with guards up of saying, I'm only going to accept this and I'm not going to accept that. And I don't agree with this. You know, I'm going to let myself just go and just be totally open. That's been one of the few times in my life where I've been that vulnerable, where I allow myself to just walk into a place and say, okay, I'm here and let me see, as opposed to saying, okay, I know how it works. Because, you know, a very analytical mind, and it's always getting to the crux of the problem, the root of the problem, and then trying to unpack it from there is how I'm naturally trained to think now. And so in doing so, it allowed me to go there and be healed. and healed from a context of my mother passing last March. So I had to deal with that grief, the grief of having worked at a huge goal that I was building with my company, the Conscious Real Estate Development Group, and having lost $1 million of investors' money and going through the pain of what that looks like. You disappointed people, which was the most painful part of
Mm,
disappointing individuals who believed in me, and then having to hear the vitriol of folks bring that anger to me, and understanding, not being mad at them, understanding why they felt the way they felt, because
mm,
you know I did let them down and then honor my commitment to them at that time. And so come to Mountains of Hope and experiencing that healing and meeting you and the people that were there that we met at Mountains of Hope, because it's created by Mike, from my understanding, as a wellness center for cancer victims. So if you're suffering from cancer, it's there to treat you from that. And he kind of threw in detoxing as a, well, we can help there too. And I went there for the detox. And I was there with all these other cancer patients, people who are, as you say, at death's door, or death is something they're dealing with on a daily basis, and a lot of pain and a lot of the sadness and grief that the family is going through, and all the things that cancer puts on a family, and having them there at Mountains of Hope, being fed delicious food that was organically grown there, from a master gentleman who, that was the thing about Mountains of Hope, was its intentionality that
mm.
really stuck to me and spoke to me. The gardener, he was more than just a gardener, and you can correct the term I'm looking for, but that's my familiarity. Is that he was a master gardener who understood how to take compost and use compost as a way to deter insects from destroying the fruit and the vegetables, and the love that was put into that, and just the flowers, the beauty that Mike had gardeners create, the ultimate atmosphere and the look of it and the feel of it and the labyrinth and all the things that he intentionally created there. And then what stuck with me the most out of all of that was something that most people take for granted that I wasn't used to, and that is the daily breakfast, lunch, and dinner
Mm.
as a community, and sitting down with folks who I had never met in my life, didn't think I was going to meet, didn't have a bio to read about, and no any kind of preparing, but just sitting down with human beings and listening to each person's joy and pain and their experience about Mountains of Hope, and just kind of what they're going through and how that really helped to heal me.
Yeah.
So you played a big role in helping people find that rhythm within that. And on top of you being there in Mountains of Hope. So why don't you share some of your experience with what I just outlaid as well? I'm just curious to hear
Yeah.
what you have
Well, I
shared.
just first want to answer that little question you had about who's the gardener. And I just want to presence regenerative farming. That's the
Thank you.
coin term that Emmanuel is using there, because
Thank you.
it is a dream and a model for all of us to observe and to learn from. Yeah, and just going back to Mike Murphy and the book, when I first had an opportunity to go to Mountains of Hope, I did meet Mike Murphy, and then I walked into this beautiful living room, and there was his book on the shelf. And I picked it off right away. I took my picture with his picture, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do my research now that I've met the man, and actually experienced the place and drank the green smoothie. You have to drink the green smoothie, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And then I got back on a plane and I went back to San Diego, and I listened and I read and I absorbed the activations that are in that book that he received from his teacher when he was in his 20s, and manifested Mountains of Hope from that. But the deeper connection that we had was around death and dying, and the importance of doing that work. And we definitely connected on the story of his late wife. And the story of his late wife is similar to the story of Nanette and how we both came onto this path together through the red road, the red path. And so there's a deeper connection there, and that we're weaving that as humanity to be able to assist people as they go through that process. And what an impact she made. Was her name Margaret?
Yes.
You know, her photo is up in that living room wall. It
Mhm.
takes up a whole wall that's, I don't know how tall, like 30 feet tall. And
Yeah.
she's a presence there. And when I saw her and then read the book and then really tapped into what Nanette was sharing with me while she was teaching me how to be a death doula, Nanette was also channeling that there's a wellness center, and there are wellness centers that will be connected all over the planet that hold these core principles. And that's what's being planted there at Mountains of Hope, or is already planted. I guess it's coming into bloom.
Yes. My experience of Mountains of Hope definitely, and I give Mike Murphy his I have to give him his credit for this because he showed me what was possible.
Mm,
Like I had visions of ideals of wellness centers. I was attempted to build in the past, and I attended other wellness centers, but nothing like Mountains of Hope. And he had everything that I was actually looking for. And like I said, and the intentionality of the spirituality was there as well, where other wellness centers might not have the spirituality. They have, you know, massages, they have yoga, they have cucumber water, they have those kind of things, soft music playing, candles and scents. And you can go there and relax and things of that nature. But I never felt fit mentally and spiritually transformed and healed as I did with Mountains of Hope. And then the people as well. Like,
mm,
you know, timing of being there was just such a blessing
yeah, yeah.
because as you know, there's windows you can go there and you won't, and some people will say they didn't have that kind of experience. And I think the people that we shared that space with
Mm,
also help elevate the energy and the healing as well.
yeah,
Um,
I can
and,
say that too. When you stepped in, it elevated my experience there.
and same here.
Mm,
And I saw you personally witness you elevating people's spirit that was there, from Todd and Pam to Angie and um, Melissa and Denise and Oscar, and Caroline, and all these individuals that, you know, I never knew, didn't know their spirits until I met them. Now I'll never forget their spirits. They're permanently in my mind, in my consciousness, and in my soul.
mm,
So that's the impact Mountains of Hope had.
mm,
And I haven't left Mountains of Hope, as a result. This is spent, I was blessed through Mike to spend a whole month there. You know, went there just for a weekend of spending a month, and he had a chance to just, you know, there. As you said, I love South America, but my interest has always been Brazil, and because I love the culture, I love the food, I love the rhythm of Brazil, I love everything about Brazil, and I still
mm,
do. But I didn't feel that spiritual vortex that I did in Colombia, being
mm,
up in those mountains and just seeing people who in America we would look down upon and say, because you don't have these material things, you have less. And
right.
you must be a lower income tier. But they didn't think and operate or behave as lower income individuals at all.
No.
And you didn't even think about what the income level they were at. You just saw their spirit, their energy, their love,
Mm,
their willingness to share. And there's something about being around warm weather people where that's the energy
mm-hmm.
that you want to share. And it's abundance. It's not, you know, I remember going to a woman's house who was a Reiki masseuse, and I was getting a massage. And when I was walked into her property, it was like a 2-level flat where they lived at the top level. And I can see from the deck they had where the massage table was, a beautiful look at the mountains. And I remember going through and getting a Reiki session and the massage and that whole spiritual experience. And When I came in, though, I noticed there was a cat and a dog, and they were kind of together. They was, just living together in each other's space
Mm.
and no conflict.
Yeah, yeah.
And something told me, so this place just has life about it, and that's what I got from that. So, long story short, I ended up leaving after my massage, and I met their daughter and her husband, and they asked their daughter to give me a tour, and she's a 13-year-old girl, gave me a tour of their property. And along this journey, I'm seeing, first thing I saw was a chicken coop. Then I see parrots. I see other animals, and it just, I had no idea how much life was there until I actually got a chance to get a tour of the
Yeah.
property, and just how much life they that depend on them, and that they're living with and tuning into the essence of those souls of those other animals. And they're just, and not only the plants as well. So the
Yeah.
plants, the flowers, just everything was beautiful about that scene. It was like, for the first time, I said, I don't know anyone in America that has this kind of peace and serenity.
Yeah.
Right? We may have bigger houses and all these other things we try to put into our houses to try to find some peace or fulfillment with material possessions that
Yeah.
we can never get. We chasing like a drug, but they had it, and it
They
was just beautiful.
Yeah. And it's just buzzing so alive.
Yes.
I had an opportunity to go to Santa Elena, which I have fallen in love with the people in Santa Elena. And when I first got there, I was given a tour into a beautiful forest that, um, in the tour guide, this beautiful sister led me to talk to the plants, to tell them what we were foraging, to ask for their medicine, to allow them to regenerate from what we were receiving, and made these beautiful bouquets of different flowers and herbs, and all of them had names and meanings and messages. And then I took that back to this little cold rustic cabin in the forest where it was raining all day and all night, and I steamed myself the most beautiful tea bath from the forest and had the most beautiful clearing of energy. So when you ask, like, can I release all the energy that I take when I'm centering and releasing? The answer is no. And sometimes I have to do a deep energetic release. And these plants were in it to win it with me. And I've never had that type of a healing. And then the last time I went back to that house, they called in another healer who came and reset my nervous system. She could see bipolar disorder with looking just in my eyes and seeing how it was connected to my spine.
Mm,
And so the magic and miracles that are there and connected to that location are, you know, it's an unlimited, untapped potential.
absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say? And I know it's a difficult, it's a very difficult question because there were so many beautiful experiences and beautiful moments. But do you have one that's a favorite moment that you can think about your entire trip to Colombia that you've been and say,
Mm,
this is my favorite moment?
yeah, for sure I do. I had a beautiful opportunity to take an excursion into the heart of Colombia. I thought I was going to go to the Lost City, but um, I was redirected and guided to visit the Mamos, an indigenous tribe who are on the Sierra Nevada mountains. I've just recently written about them in my Substack, and I was able to have a 3-day guided journey of rebirthing myself
Mm,
in a very grounded, non psychedelic, humbling, pure way, just in community with love. And the connection and the experience with these people shifted me, activated different parts of my being, um, lightened areas of distortion within my body that I couldn't see before that I can see now.
Mm.
So that ultimately was the tip top experience that well, I've been saying for the last few years, I'm rebirthing myself. And I didn't get that it's like layer after layer after layer of rebirthing.
Mm.
And finally getting to this point of feeling like I got to the center of the onion. And I no longer need to be dealing with the suffering of mental health. Now I just need to function in this world fully human, fully aligned,
Absolutely.
turned
Absolutely.
on, Captain.
Well, now I want to transition now into in your bio. You talk about path to forgiveness. So, what inspired that? What exactly is path to forgiveness, and why is forgiveness? Why is forgiveness important?
Mm. Yeah, forgiveness seems to be the one main theme. Whether I work with children on the spectrum, or I'm working with people at the end of life, or people who are dealing with a mental health crisis, no matter what the transition, there's typically a stigma and an attachment to suffering. And the one thing that actually releases that is forgiveness. And it may not be like forgiveness of a person or forgiveness of self, but it is like a releasing of an attachment. And in that way, it's like I forgive this, I release this, and that is like the ultimate gift when we're transitioning completely in our last breath, to have that forgiveness, having released anything that would hold us to a plane of suffering. So I feel like that is the beat of the drum. That's the beat of the red drum, is to look at that. And in retrospect, when we talk about mountains of hope, hope is also another aspect that we hold. And when we don't have hope, it's a conversation to have. Or when we're losing hope, it's a conversation to have. So oftentimes, hope is the conversation that's going to take us into forgiveness.
Mm.
Or loss of hope can take us into the conversation of forgiveness. And that's what I'm holding space for now, is to have the conversations and to be able to release and get the freedom from suffering.
So, path to forgiveness is a book you're writing, or
That's a great title for a book. Thank you. But no, it's a podcast.
it's your podcast? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned as I gotten older, the importance of forgiveness. Like all my life, I've been an impression you forgive someone else because of the fact that it just makes it better for you. But I never understood what better meant. But I actually just accepted that. And I've met people in my life who refuse to forgive. As a matter of fact, they take pride in not forgiving, holding a grudge. They would give themselves the award for the best grudge holder in the world if they could. And but as I gotten older, as I gotten wiser, as my vibration increased, I realized that my way of looking at forgiveness is this: you don't, and you know this, you don't forgive someone for them. It's for you. It's then that's getting rid of that negative energy from
Mm-hmm.
you. And then more importantly, the hardest part of forgiveness is yourself. That's what we don't normally do. We don't forgive ourselves. And I didn't forgive myself for my lesson in Baltimore City. It took me 5 years to finally get to the point where I can forgive myself, and actually didn't happen until I went to Mountains of Hope. I was
Mm.
able to forgive myself. You know, and that's so important and so key is self forgiveness. And so now my question for you is, how do people begin that journey of self forgiveness?
Yeah, it's a challenging one. I'm doing it specifically through objects because sometimes it's hard to have that personal understanding of self when you're actually in the self, or you can't see the forest from the trees.
Hmm.
So to create an object is how I'm playing with it as a teacher. And to look at an object that I desire. And an object could be even something like an emotion. Like you said, some people just want to hold on to their resentment. So it could be anything that you desire, an object of your desire. And looking at that. Right now, I've had an object of desire that's a home. And when I look at that, and I also look at the path of forgiveness, I can see that I can just cross it out. I have the power as a creator on this path to say, I desire that object no more. No more. And that gives me a place to start on forgiveness. As soon as I can feel that release, then I can say, oh, I can forgive myself for all the pain and suffering I created in the attachment to that desire. And I can see every 360-degree angle of how I did that until I fully completed that desire. Now, I do have a desire for another house. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not crossing that one out yet. But to know which one I really need to forgive and release is important. So I'm just starting there in the conversation. And maybe one day there'll be like a museum of artifacts of things that people pull from their process of doing this work, of letting go. Someone who's at the end of life and they go into their jewelry box and they pull grandmother's diamond ring that has a story of contention where the sisters fought over it after grandma died, and finally oldest sister won, and it's been in this jewelry box for 50 years while the sisters have been divided because someone wouldn't give up the attachment, and then when she finds the ring and she's like, I desire this no more. Then what does that offer in resolution between her and her sister?
Right.
And could we give up the attachment to our things that we desire just for a moment so that we can gain a new perspective?
Absolutely. I think about that when you talk about the attachment. It reminds me of Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And one of those laws is the law of detachment. And I always remember that law in particular because the way you're raised, a friend of mine coined a term called cultural givens. What you're indoctrinated with, what you're programmed with is the term I use now when you're a kid. And I was always told as a child, the first thing you want to do is, that's mine. You want to claim ownership of something. You want to attach yourself because you see so many things coming and going out of your life that when someone says something's yours, you finally say, okay, I have something I can own. And then that just creates that attachment there. So now understanding that for spiritual growth, you have to learn how to do the law of detachment. That was a challenge for me. But it was also freeing when I got to the point where I can detach myself now. Not only detach myself from objects, but detach myself from outcomes. Like a lot of people will hope when they meet people or when they're doing business that you hope this transaction works out. You hope you close this deal, and you have all this attachment to the outcome. And you learn that as you get older in life, and when you start to seek better guidance and the journey to become more fully human, you realize that I do because that's I am. If you use the analogy and the metaphor of the tree earlier, I do this because this is who I am. I don't do this because I'm hoping to get a better job or make more money or get more clients. If those things come as a result of these actions, great. But if they don't, I'm going to still do it anyway because this is my journey. This is who I am. And that's such a freeing feeling and way to live life and not be constrained by the opinions and rejections and feelings of others. So one A couple of quick questions I want to ask before we get into the top of our hour here. And I'm curious about, as a deaf doula, you are around a lot of folks who, you've been around a lot of folks who are close to death. What is there anything you find that would you say that's it's common across that either a fear or a regret, or what seems to be the dominant emotion that they're dealing with that's common among the folks in those situations?
It is typically like betrayals, fears, uh, things that are unresolved,
Hmm.
and they'll just come up. It's like you don't in certain stages of life, you don't have a choice about what's going to process from your biology in the release. So the more rapid your body is going through changes, the quicker these exchanges of release are processing.
Hmm.
And what the common thing that I will say is that people get complete before they leave.
Hmm.
Even my father, in his process, I think he thought that he would be complete that day. But unbeknownst to him, two paramedics saved him and stabilized him, even with the DNR,
Hmm.
because they didn't know about his DNR,
Right.
which allowed us to have more than 24 hours to process and to process with him alive. Because regardless of having a voice or even a mind to create a voice, the presence alone is in communion.
Yes. Yes.
And he didn't go until he was complete
Hmm.
with that communion.
Hmm.
So that's the common thing that I see, is that, yeah, we think we can control and predict and plan, but we are not the ones with the higher power here. So just humbling ourselves and seeing what there is that creation needs to release through
Hmm.
us.
Hmm. That's powerful.
Hmm.
One of my last questions I want to ask you is, what would 50-year-old Jess say to 20-year-old Jess, just stepping out there now and saying, I'm an adult, what does life have to offer me? How would you, what advice would you give her? How would you support her?
Hmm. Oh, I love that question. That's a 30-year gap. Um, my 20-year-old Jess was a firecracker. She was a young mother, and just when you talk about that euphoric energy, I had so much energy. I mean, I when I got married at 18, I had a stepdaughter. So I had an already made family,
Mm-hmm.
and already need to just like hustle and get going. And um, I would tell her that drive is a beautiful thing, and that drive will get her so many experiences that will entrain her body with what is to come. Oftentimes when I go back and tell people fractions of my life story, I'll get the reflection that it's so much, it's so full. And now I know why I've created such a full life. It's because I needed to have this myriad of experiences to be able to have a foundation to serve from now. And that explosive energy has served me well. And so I'm very grateful. And I no longer am holding any shame for that 20-year-old who was very unaware as she was moving through a lot.
And as we get ready to wrap up, I have to ask you this last question, because we use this term several times throughout the show. And of course, we know what it means. especially to us. But I want you to share what it means to our listening audience when you use the term fully human. What does
Hmm.
that mean?
Yeah, fully human is holding my full potential. It's seeing where I have limits and then creating limitlessness. Seeing where I've been stopped and creating myself as unstoppable.
There you go. I love it. I love it. You know, one last little piece about Mountains of Hope is that one of the things that, in addition to healing, it also is a place that if you're vibrating at a high enough frequency, you can truly build some resonance with people. And as a result, you and I looking at building together on the Fully Human movement. We're in talks with Melissa, another person we met at Mountains of Hope, through another person we met at Mountains of Hope, Denise. And so the great thing about it, who knows what the universe has in store for us? But what was wonderful is that we're open to exploring that. And we're looking and we're seeking to say, there's something about our presence meeting there at the same time. And let's look at the way we can work together and continue this experience, this energy, and this co-creation with each other. And I believe
Mm.
that's a beautiful thing. And so this podcast is being the launch of that. You and I, we're going to do some great things together. We're working together in various ways to help you build your tribal resonance system, because I believe in what you're doing and who you are as a person. And that's where I'm so happy to be spending my last quarter of my life. That's what I call it. Using the football analogy, I'm in the fourth quarter.
Quarter four.
And I'm coming at the fourth quarter with a 3 quarters of experience behind me, but with a different mindset and different objective than I had in the first 3 quarters.
Mm.
So I look forward to the infinite possibilities that we're going to experience together during this fourth quarter journey.
Mm.
So as we wrap up today, Jess, what contact information do you want to share with our listening audience, how they can get in contact with you, find out more about you, and just follow your journey with you?
Yeah. Well, I'll put out my website here of Trinity Peak Foundation, and you can reach me at Jess at Trinity Peak Foundation. I'm also writing in my Substack, and I'll be inviting some of these people on that you've referenced here on this podcast to come introduce themselves. And so we can keep this conversation going and the fully human movement moving.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Jess, for being a part of the King Connections podcast, connecting with intent. As I have listed out here, you have been a strong connection in my life, and I look forward to you continuing to be a strong connection in my life as well.
Mm.
And to our listening audience, into the next episode of King Connections, let's all look to connect with intent. Thank you.
Thank you.